This is a Willets Point Shea Stadium bound 7 express train. The next and last stop is Willets Point, Shea Stadium.
Oh, yes, it is the Subway to Shea podcast. Anthony Rivera here with you, talking about all the news and happenings surrounding that team from Queens, the New York Mets. Episode 225 from the Subway to Shea studios in my office. Thank you all for being patient and for hanging in there. This is going to be a big show today. Got a guest. It's been a while since I had a guest on. So shout out to everyone in the chat that's in the room right now. Armand, Maureen, Carlos Ramos in the chat. Appreciate you. G Money Stacks as well. True Mets Talk. Appreciate you for being in here as well, my friend. Nelson Cruz, Green Machine. And Winter Meetings. It's a Winter Meetings preview. And I thought the best way to do that is to bring on my good friend from Till Mets Do His Part, John Saponaro, not only for the Mets preview, but we got the QBC coming up. And every year I like to have John on for the QBC discussion. Master Flip, shout out to you. Matthew Trotta, good morning. John Connolly, appreciate you as well for being a part of the show. John, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good, man. It is it's early for me, but I will get up early for you as long as I have a big cup of coffee and I'm ready to rock.
No whiskey this morning. I thought with the new show we might bring out the whiskey. It might be time to but you got some games today to play. So
I can't do it. Yeah, if people don't know, I live on the West Coast. I live in LA, so weather is still good enough to play baseball, softball all year round. And I have 3 softball games today, so I don't think I can wake up in the morning, drink whiskey, and then go play 3 softball games. I don't think it's the right thing to do.
I wonder if they're going to be agents from the winter meetings at these games to check you out. No. Oh, man. Appreciate you for being on today. Winter meetings we got coming up. A lot of work that this New York Mets team has to do this offseason to now just make it back to the playoffs. I thought we'd be talking about, maybe we'll make it to the NLCS every couple years, World Series appearance. Now we're just looking to get right back into the postseason. And there's been a lot of talks, a lot of rumors going around. The first one I want to discuss with you is the fact that the Mets' interest in a whole bunch of free agent starting pitchers, and they need an ace in the staff. At the very least, they need one ace starting pitcher. I don't know if you consider him an ace, but Mark Feinsand of MLB.com talked about the Mets being favorites for Framber Valdez. Orioles also in on him as well. Last season, 13-11 with a 3.66 ERA, had 187 strikeouts in 192 innings pitched. Career-wise, got a 3.36 ERA. Pitched very well in the postseason. The year the Astros won the World Series, had a 1.44 ERA and 3-0. Do you think Valdez is an ace or has ace potential? Because if you put him on the Mets right now, he's the de facto ace of that staff. That's how in rough times we are right now.
Yeah, look, I think if you look across the landscape of the free agent starting pitchers available, Framber Valdez is probably the only one who checks the box of being an ace. I think Dylan Cease has ace stuff. He's obviously off the board. I think when healthy, Michael King could have ace potential, but he's never quite done it. Started off, in the bullpen and then, wasn't healthy last year. 2 years ago, he looked like he was a budding ace type of player. I think Framber Valdez is the one guy that you could say, okay, he's been at the head of the rotation for the Houston Astros while the Houston Astros have been winning World Series. You alluded to some of the numbers. He's not always been great in the postseason. He's had a couple of really great runs. Houston was automatic to make the postseason basically every year since he's been there. So he's had a lot of experience. I think the one thing that you look at with Framber that people don't consider maybe an ace is that he's more of a ground ball pitcher than a strikeout pitcher. But I don't know. I think the numbers speak for themselves. He generates a ton of ground balls, which bodes well for the Mets, who just built their up the middle defense, rebuilt it with Lindor and Simeon, as opposed to Lindor and Jeff McNeil. So I think there's real interest there. The only thing that would concern me about Framber Valdez personally is the length of the contract. I don't care about the money. I don't care how Steve Cohen spends his golden toilet money. I don't care if the AAV is a little over $30 million, so that maybe you can get the the actual term of the contract to be a little bit shorter. But, look, if you told me right now, Ant, that the Mets could sign Framber Valdez and it would be 4 years, I would say yes at any dollar amount. I would go as much as 5 years because I think I've said it on my show before. If you're comfortable doing X amount of years for a player, another year more than that should never sway you away. So I'm comfortable doing 4. I will do 5 begrudgingly. Anything more than that, and you start to wonder whether or not that's a deal the Mets should or could make. I saw Jim Bowden, who's not right a lot of the times, let's be honest. I think in his column, he predicted the Mets are going to sign Framber for like 7 years, 210. That's not going to happen. The Mets are not going to give Framber Valdez 7 years, and I don't think they should. But I think their interest is real because they do need an ace, and I think it's hard to predict trades. I think we all think the Mets should go the trade route, but you don't know. Like, is Skubal available? Is he not? Is Peralta available? Is he not? Is Joe Ryan available? Is he not? I don't know. Will the Marlins trade Alcantara to us? I have no idea. So it's hard for us to predict that. It's easier for us to predict free agents. And if it comes down to free agents and you want an ace, Framber Valdez is the guy. I would love to be able to do it for 4 years or less. I don't know if that's possible. I would suck it up and do it for 5.
I agree. I mean, he's 32 years old. He'll be 37, 38 by the time that contract is over. It'd be a huge mistake giving him one of these long contracts similar to what a Dylan Cease just got. And I don't think Dylan Cease is as good as Framber Valdez is. So that was a shocking move that was made that was Toronto, right? That signed him. Just really going over my head on that. But yeah, I would not give Valdez more than 5 years. I think that he is good enough to lead this rotation if need be, because let's face facts, we can't get guys to get into the 5th, 6th inning with some of our arms here. And the fact that he's a ground ball pitcher helps that cause to have him pitch deeper into games. And now that the up the middle, well, at least, second and shortstop is pretty much solidified. And you know what? I'll give a little credit to Brett Beatty for improving at third base. Pete Alonso is only really bad at first base in transition to me. Like when he has to throw the ball home or first or even a second base, that's where the problem comes in.
Yeah.
But there's no doubt that he could scoop a ball and he can get the outs.
He's good around the bag. I think a lot of people, Pete's never going to win a Gold Glove, but the most important thing for me, the most important thing a first baseman can do for your team defensively is save errors from other players on the infield and turn those plays into outs. And Pete's very good at that. Pete has great footwork and he has soft hands scooping the ball. So, I don't know if Pete's going to be on the team, but yeah, his range is limited. He should probably be DHing at least some of the time, and his throws are horrendous, but his footwork and his hands are good.
There's so much emphasis too on getting these strikeout pitchers, but a lot of the times these guys are wasting tons and tons of pitches. With the ground ball guys, you could get them deeper into games. I wonder if that's something that we see in the league start changing, as we know for such a long time now, it's been got to get the guy who throws the most strikeouts, got to get now that we got these guys going deeper into games that are ground ball type guys. I mean, look at the season that, Clay Holmes had, not the best of, but transitioning from being a reliever to a starter with the fact that he's a ground ball pitcher, that he gets pitches in play, was able to get to the fit. He was the best pitcher we had, unfortunate, but he was. It's true.
I think the striking out people is good. Striking out people is sexy. Striking out people matters in the postseason when a home run can turn the game on its ear. But if you can keep the ball in the yard, which is another thing Framber Valdez does pretty well because he gets so many ground balls, that's another big positive, right? Like, it doesn't really matter how you get the outs. It's just a matter of getting the outs. And so, Framber also, and I'm not trying to turn this into, I like Framber Valdez. I don't want to make this sound like I'm all in on this move. There are like players in the starting rotation that I would prefer over Framber Valdez, but I want to give the guy his flowers. There was a stretch, for the Astros last season, I think, where they won like 13 or 15 of his starts in a row. And he factored into the decision like 10 times out of the 15. Like, he had like 10 wins in the 13 or in the 15. And obviously we know wins are not the most important thing for starting pitchers. But when you look at how he was able to get those wins, it's because, Ant, to your point, he was pitching 7 innings, 8 innings, complete game, 6 innings, 7 innings in that stretch. And that's the kind of run you can go on with a player like Framber. So, look, again, I'm not going to be unhappy. The Mets need starting pitching talent. They need to raise the ceiling of their starting pitching, but they also need to raise the floor. And I think Framber Valdez is a guy who, with one player, does both, because he gives you innings. He's going to give you a certain level of reliability, but he's also, like you said, he'd be the ace day one. Now, we all hope Nolan McLean will eventually be better than him, and maybe he's better than him right now, but I think it's really unfair to put that on a kid who's had a handful of starts at the big league level and be like, okay, go out there and be the ace. Oh, by the way, our team has Juan Soto. Oh, by the way, we're owned by Steve Cohen, and we're in New York, and we're trying to win a World Series. Go get him, kid. So I think you need to find somebody that pushes McLean at least to the 2. So, and I think Framber would do that. Again, not my first pick. Everybody's first pick is Tarek Skubal. If it's not Skubal, it's Peralta for me. But again, it's so hard to forecast trades. Are these guys going to be available? Are they not? I don't know. I don't know. And you don't know. And nobody knows except, honestly, the GMs of the Tigers and the Brewers, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And that your partner here, Ibby from Till Mets Joe's part as well, saying the more we hear about Framber, King, and Ranger with the Mets speaks to the potential lack of availability via trade. So obviously the general manager, Stearns, knows what's going on already. We'll get into some of the trade candidates a little bit later on in the show. But I want one more question to you on Framber Valdez, and it leads into a couple of these comments here. John Connolly saying Valdez, a Citi Field pitcher, but might be a head case or a big game pitcher. Nelson Cruz saying, as long as he doesn't put my catcher on the IL, I'm okay with Valdez. Carlos Ramos saying, I'm going to be honest, I'm very concerned about Framber. I feel we should avoid him. I don't trust his attitude. I would strongly prefer to trade for Peralta. Do we need to worry about what he brings to the clubhouse? We've already seen now, whether it's rumor or innuendo or whatever, every time something goes wrong with the Mets, it always tracks back to what's happening in the clubhouse. So if we add a guy like Framber Valdez, are we going to have to start worrying about, how he's going to behave in the clubhouse?
Honestly, Ant, I know this isn't a good answer because it doesn't make for good podcast listening, but I would say it on my show. Like, I don't know. I don't follow the Houston Astros well enough to know if Framber Valdez has been a malcontent in the past. I've never heard anything else as far as the national media is concerned. So it makes me think that this situation with his catcher was kind of a one-off thing. Does it turn me off a little bit if you crossed up your catcher on purpose and threw a fastball and hit him in the chest? A little. That's not great. But, I think it was shout out to Odd Villain, who's a great commenter on our show. I think he comes into your show too, said something about like, I don't even know that catcher's name. And I don't know, like, that catcher could be bagging groceries right now. We're talking about Framber Valdez. We're talking about an established guy. And he's tongue in cheek when he said that. But I do think that there is something to be said there where, maybe there was an incident between these two guys, but doesn't mean that Framber's a bad guy in the clubhouse. But to be honest with you, I don't watch Houston Astros baseball. I don't know enough up to say whether or not he's a good dude or a bad dude to have on your team. It does seem like him and his agent both went to the GM meetings last month, and that seemed like maybe they were doing a little bit of damage control for what happened between him and his catcher of like, hey, let's talk to teams and face-to-face and things like that. So maybe that was part of it. And maybe there was a big misunderstanding where, we're all entitled to have bad days. And I think, guys don't always get along. We're seeing that with, I know a lot of the stuff in the article by Mike Puma was kind of clickbait between the Mets and with Lindor and Soto and Lindor and McNeil, but Lindor and McNeil clearly aren't the best of friends. I don't think they're going to have a blood feud that spans generations, but they're not the best of friends, and they wouldn't be the first two people to not be the best of friends on teams. So if Framber Valdez had a bad day, that's fine. And I think that's probably what it is, because again, I correct me if I'm wrong, but I've never seen any issue where people are like, oh my God, Framber Valdez is a head case before this one incident. So
yeah. And it's probably just something that the media would bring up. Look, the Soto Lindor thing, I said it last episode that it's a non-issue. And even with McNeil and Lindor, if it was that bad, they wouldn't be teammates for 5 years. So, I think it's something that is not to probably be as worried about as a lot of people think it is. Probably more of, like you said, media clickbait. I'm going to bring up a player that I don't even have on my list, but thanks to Master Flip for bringing it up. Luis Castillo has identical numbers as Framber last 3 years. Mets should explore a trade over giving Framber a long-term deal, which is, I've always wanted Luis Castillo. I wanted him last season during the trade deadline, but we know the Mariners were pretty much in a huge playoff position and weren't going to trade from that plethora of rotation starters. What are your thoughts on Castillo?
Castillo's great. I mean, I don't think he's the pitcher he was when he got dealt to Seattle, but I don't think the Mets need him to be the pitcher he was when he got dealt to Seattle. Another guy who, like Master Flip points out, nearly identical numbers, very similar type of pitcher, think would play well in Citi Field. The problem is, and it's not to put down Flip or what Carlos Ramos said before about Freddie Peralta. Like I said, Freddie Peralta would be high on my list personally. If it's not Skubal, I want Freddie Peralta. Castillo would be a little bit lower on the depth chart just because of the age and upside and ace potential still. But we don't know if these guys are available. We think that they might be. We think that they should be. Seattle looking in a different place to find offense, has a plethora of starting pitching, like you said, but then we look up and every start of the season, Luis Castillo is on the Mariners, and every trade deadline that comes and goes, he's still on the Mariners. And, with Peralta, and I don't even want to talk about Skubal because it's so hard, because it's such a unique situation. He's arguably the best pitcher in baseball, and that team is very good, but it is a similar situation with Skubal and Peralta. These are two teams that are better, even in the short term, with those guys on the team. There is no return the Mets can give the Brewers or the Tigers that will ever make up for trading one of those players. And Peralta's not even as good as Skubal. So it seems that you would say, well, you know what? They're not going to sign them, so they might as well get as good as they can get for them now and give them to a team that has a full year of control and maybe an opportunity to re-sign them or extend them or whatever the case may be. Yeah, all of that makes sense on paper. But then you're the Detroit Tigers, who have lived in the baseball doldrums for a long time, and now they're finally out of it. They're a good competitive team. How good and competitive are they without Tarik Skubal? And then you have the Milwaukee Brewers, who I think have a little bit more, thanks to, in part, David Stearns, by the way, a foundation to go forward with, where you're like, okay, this team has the right. I mean, they're the smallest market, right? One of the smallest markets in the sport in Milwaukee. They have the right mentality to probably be able to piece this thing together with other players if Peralta goes. But again, that team, I think they had the best record in the NL, right? Didn't they finish with either the best record or second best record, whatever?
Yeah, I think they did, yeah.
I don't think they're that good without Freddie Peralta. So all the signs say, yeah, 1 year of control left, trade them, get something back for them, get the best package you can. And a team would be incentivized to give you a better package now than at the deadline because it's more control. It's a full year. Again, these teams, especially Peralta, because Boris isn't his agent, teams could try to extend them or try to whatever once they're in the building. All of that makes sense. I agree with Flip. I agree with Carlos. But then you have to look at it and say, how good is Milwaukee going to be? And what can you give them that doesn't rip out your guts to do it in order to acquire these players? And I'm not a prospect hugger. I've said, we've talked privately, publicly, I would trade anybody for any right deal. But, you can't give up for Freddie Peralta. You can't give up Jet Williams, Carson Bench, Jonathan. You can't give them a deal that's going to make you say, what are we doing? And maybe that's the kind of deal. Maybe that's the king's ransom they're waiting for. If you're the Mets, you can't do that. You can't give your top 5 prospects up for one player. That's insane. So, I think there's a deal that could be struck, but it has to be realistic for both sides. And that's why it's so hard to be like, let's just trade instead. Because who knows? Who knows if you can actually pull off that deal?
Yeah, and it's also hard, the fact that these guys are going to be free agents at the end of the year. Those are the 2 best pitchers, and they're both going to be free agents at the end of the year. So even if, Cohen has the wherewithal to sign these guys, it's still, you never know what's in their heads. Not all players want to come to New York. Not all players want to play here. Some will take a lesser contract to play somewhere else. It all depends. A couple of other starting pitchers that are available, and Mark Feinsand as well talked about these guys the Mets having interest in Tatsuya Imai, Michael King, as you mentioned earlier, and Ranger Suarez. Imai, He's 27 years old, had a career best 1.92 ERA last season for the Cebu Lions in the MPB. He was 10-5. You have until January 2nd to sign him, right? Because he was posted by the Lions. So there's that. There's Michael King, who's 30 years old. You mentioned him earlier. 3.44 ERA in 2025, career 3.24, pitched in New York with the Yankees and pitched pretty well as there. 2024 was a transition for him, just like Clay Holmes, becoming a starting pitcher from becoming a reliever. But last year, the injury bug, nerve injury in his throwing shoulder, also lost time to a knee injury. Some things that we probably should keep in mind as well as Clay Holmes is on this rotation. That's something to look into and have to worry about, because I do think that Clay Holmes did have to get pushed more to his limit because of the fact that we didn't have a good enough rotation. He was the only one we can count on. So that's something that I would be concerned about. He went way over his innings limit, and just something to keep an eye out on next season. Ranger Suarez, he's 30. In 2025, he was 12-8, 3.22 ERA. Postseason in 11 games, 1.48. Rank these three pitchers for me in order of interest.
It's hard because I think the Mets need two things. I said before, they need to increase their floor and they need to increase their ceiling. That's why they're hunting for this ace. So I am more for a flashier move of a true ace, like a Freddie Peralta, let's say, and then a move that allows you to unload Kodai Senga and get a guy. I saw somebody say like Merrill Kelly in the comments, or, I've talked a lot about, an interest in Mitch Keller, who's not going to excite you, but Mitch Keller pitches over the last 4 years. I think he's averaged like 170 innings. I think if you could get away from Kodai Senga and you can get a guy who doesn't excite you the way that Kodai Senga's potential does, but is more reliable and more available, like Merrill Kelly or Mitch Keller, somebody like that, while pairing them with a true top flight arm, I think that is a Peralta, a Skubal, whoever. I think that is, if you gave the Mets truth serum, what they would want to do. Now, they may not be able to, because that takes a lot of moving parts. That's, if you're talking about like Keller, Peralta, and the Senga thing, that's 3 trades you have to make. Maybe you can include Senga in one of those deals, whatever. But it's 3 trades you have to make that work. Whereas it's so much easier, like I said, to do this on the free agent market. So if you look at those 3 guys that you just mentioned, the problem that I have, and the reason why I brought that first bit up, is because none of them are aces, not as it stands right now.
Yeah.
I actually think the most intriguing guy to me, if I had to rank just the 3 of them, I think it's Suarez first, Michael King second, Imai third for me. I think Suarez is an intriguing pitcher. I think he's kind of this guy who gets lost in the shuffle a bit, and I'm interested in what he could do. Now, I don't know the kind of deal that you would have to give a Ranger Suarez, which is why when I look at Michael King, despite the injuries and the converting from the bullpen, I think if he had a year last year like he had the year before, you're talking about probably a 5-6 year deal for him, because he's solidified himself as a rotation mainstay. I think coming off of the injury year, you can probably get him on a contract that's like 2 years with an opt-out after 1, or 3 years with an opt-out after 1, something like that. That might be very palatable for the Mets. So he jumps ahead of Imai for me. The problem with Imai is I just don't know what he is. I don't watch New Japan baseball. I don't know. I know he's 27, which is intriguing. I know he's got a great arm, which is great. But, sometimes guys come over from other leagues, not just Japan, but they come over from other leagues and they're excellent. And sometimes they're not. Sometimes they don't translate at all. And maybe I'm being a little unfair because he's a different player than Kodai Senga, but we're talking about, as electric as Kodai Senga could be, I've been talking all show about ways to get him off the team. And they are 2 different people and they are 2 different players. But, a lot of people who know the Japanese league better than I do are saying that Imai might be a good 3. To me, the Mets have guys who can be a good 3. Clay Holmes is a good 3. Sean Manaea is a good 3. David Peterson is maybe not in that same ballpark, but let's just say a good 3. I think you need reliability on the back end, somebody who's going to give you innings. And I think you need star power, ace potential at the top. So a good 3 is fine, but then you have a rotation full of 3s again. And so that would be my issue with all of those guys, Suarez, King, and Imai. But Imai just scares me the most because I've never seen him pitch. I've seen Michael King pitch. I've watched Ranger Suarez pitch. I think I have a pretty good idea of what they're about, especially at this point in their respective careers. I have no idea. Like I'm not asking you, but like rhetorically, is Imai Kodai Senga or is he Yamamoto? Is he Roki Sasaki or is he Hideki Arabu? Is he Hideo Nomo? I don't know. I just don't know what caliber of pitcher you're importing over here. And that's tricky to me, especially if he's going to command, a multi-year deal, 5, 6, 7 years or whatever because of his age.
Yeah, I think that even if Imai is a Senga, I think I'm still staying away. Because, like you said, we have so many 3s on the rotation. We
so
need
many
top
3s.
2s. Yeah. It's time to move on. And I think Ranger Suarez could be a 2 on a rotation. He's gone on a good Phillies rotation, taking him away from Philly. Taking one of their players away. I'm pretty sure that's a little bit intriguing. And I'm very interested to see how they go about this rotation. But I think that the Mets only end up bringing, I know people want to see them bring in 2 starting pitchers. I think they only end up with 1. I know the depth is not strong, but they do have depth in the rotation. Like to the fact where are you going to play all these guys, right?
They have a lot of quantity over quality.
Yeah. And that's not even including a Christian Scott that's coming back from injury. That's going to be in the mix for the rotation. Sean Manaea, where are you going to put him? Obviously Clay Holmes, David Peterson. So if you're telling me that they're going to trade David Peterson or even Kodai Senga, as you mentioned, then I think maybe we're talking about 2 pitchers. I think that they're only going in for an ace, and that's it. Outside of trading Senga and another pitcher, I think they're only bringing in an ace if they can.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of stuff can change, especially this time of year. That these situations are fluid. Will this guy get traded? Will he not? Are the Mets linked to this player? Is this team linked to this player? Whatever. Stuff changes all the time. So there's a bit of old news, right? But Ibby and I had Will Salmon on our show, who does a great job covering the Mets for The Athletic, about 2 weeks ago, whatever. And he said at the time, based on what he is hearing and seeing and how the Mets are planning to operate, they would only have room to add 1 starting pitcher unless they trade a starting pitcher. So you're right. And that's part of the reason why I've been banging the drum of trying to trade Kodai Senga. The only 2 players the Mets could really trade from their starting rotation as it stands right now that would open up a true roster spot are either David Peterson or Kodai Senga. Each guy has their warts, but each guy in a seller's market has their upside, right? David Peterson is an expiring contract. He's a younger player. He had a bad second half, but a really good first half. And then the year before finished really strong with a really good second half and all that stuff. We know what David Peterson has done as Mets fans. Kodai Senga is the ultimate sell low, but maybe you hit the lottery. And I think that's how you would sell Kodai Senga to another team, which is, look, when this guy's right, he'll pitch to an ERA that's 1.9 like he did last year until he got hurt. The guy had one of the best ERAs in the sport. But if he's not 100% right, you might have, I don't know if he's truly as bad as he showed down the stretch for us, but he did that. So there's potential that that's as bad as he can be. And I just think if you're going to sell him off I think he makes about $14 or $15 million. I think if you could pay that down a little bit so that more teams who might want to take a swing at an ace would be involved, right? Like I think Carlos Ramos said you could put Kodai Senga in a deal for Freddie Peralta. I think that's makes some sense, even though the Brewers are trying to cut payroll. And on the surface, you look at it and you say, well, Kodai Senga makes more than Freddie Peralta. How could you do that? Well, you do that by paying down some of the deal. And if you're the Mets and you're Steve Cohen, you're getting an ace for $8 million, which is what Freddie Peralta makes. You can afford to kick some money in there to turn Kodai Senga from, let's say, a $14 million player to a $4 or $5 million player? Because would you pay $18 million for Freddie Peralta? I would. So you throw $10 million. You're still paying him under market value for what he offers. Now, obviously, Kodai Senga is not the thing that gets the deal done. You're giving them prospects, but you might be able to flip them. You might be able to flip that player, add that player into the deal. So I think that's a good, astute observation there from Carlos. Yeah, and there are other places too. Again, if you pay that number down to, let's just even call it half, you get that from 14 to in the $7 million range. You know, I don't know. Would the Pittsburgh Pirates be interested in Kodai Senga for $7 million? Maybe. Some of these teams also, they have, you know how this works. They have to show payroll. Teams could want to cut payroll all they want, but they have to show something. That's why people keep saying like, oh, if the Mets could trade for Sandy Alcantara, you could put Jeff McNeil in the deal. Yeah, because the Marlins have one player who makes money, Sandy Alcantara, and they can't just trade him and not take any money back. It's not the thing that gets you the player, but it's certainly a thing that you could say. And also, by the way, take Jeff McNeil and his $15 million. Take Kodai Senga, we'll give you $10 million. You're on the hook for the rest of it. You know, something like that. So, yeah, I don't know. I think, but they have to make a move in the starting rotation. I think that what Will said on our show is still true. If they don't make a move in the starting rotation to trade somebody, they're not going to get two people. Now, I think they should. I would work very aggressively. And if I run the Mets, I would work very aggressively to trade Kodai Senga. That's what I would do. And I would try to get two pitchers then. That would be my move.
Or even Green Machine in the chat saying you think they could get something decent in return if you trade Senga despite his poor performance after the injury, since he has a very affordable contract. I think that's the key, is the affordable contract is enticing to not only these teams, but also the fact that he's got talent, right? I mean,
tons.
When he's healthy, he's been a very good pitcher for the Mets. It's just that he can't stay on the field, and there's just so much maintenance involved with him. So if the Mets make some moves here and they make some trades, and we'll get into trading for an ace here. We talked about Freddie Peralta last season, 17-6, 2.70 ERA. He had 204 strikeouts in 176 and 2/3 innings pitched. Ken Rosenthal said Milwaukee ready for trade discussions, but not necessarily are, looking. I obviously the trade package probably has to blow them away. Talk about Tariq Skubal. Both of these guys are 29 years old, which is a big part of that, them being young and getting some big contracts here. Now, Buster Olney of ESPN said the Tigers are continuing to be engaged with other teams' interest in Tariq Skubal. We know Scott Boras is his agent, so he's probably going to free agency after the season's over. Last season, 2.21 ERA for him. He had 241 strikeouts in 195 innings pitched, 2.04 ERA in the postseason, has led the league in ERA the last two seasons. He's an innings eater, which we love. We know that the Tigers have had some interest in Brett Beatty in a deal, which I think you and I would start the car immediately and ship him off to Detroit if we could. Do you agree that the Mets are the best equipped to put together the proper trade package and sign either Skubal or Peralta? Because I think that they kind of lead the charge in that they have a top 5 farm system. They got pitchers that are ready to go, as well as a couple position players, and they got Steve Cohen's money.
Yes, I do. Put Peralta aside for a moment because, again, no shot at him, but he's very good. He's not Tariq Skubal. Also, I said before, his agent isn't Scott Boras. I think he is infinitely extendable, especially because he has a relationship with David Stearns from their time in Milwaukee. And I'm pretty sure David Stearns is the one who signed Peralta to the extension that he is currently on when Freddie Peralta wasn't even, he wasn't an ace. He wasn't even really fully a starting pitcher at that time. And David Stearns, was rewarding the talent and the upside as you need to do when you identify that as a small market GM. So savvy move there. I think he is extendable. Tariq Skubal, I know he's a Boras guy, and I know Boras guys don't really get extensions, but when you have the money that Cohen has, it's a unique situation. You'd have to give up a ton for him. You'd have to at least engage in the conversation of talking an extension. And here's why I think it's possible, right? Yoshinobu Yamamoto now has the highest salary for a pitcher. Well, if you're Skubal and you get traded to the Mets and David Stearns comes calling and says, hey, just talk to Steve. We are going to put 10 years, $400 million on the table. You don't think that's enough to at least get the conversation started? I do. How much more money is he going to make? Now, I'm not saying 400 is it. Like, they're like, yeah, great. No negotiations. We're done. And maybe that gets up to 450. It becomes a crazy, high contract throughout. Sure. But I think because of how good he is and the Mets' willingness to spend money, I think that you could potentially sign him despite him being, one of the top 2 best pitchers in the sport, being rep by Boris, all of that. I think you can just put a contract on the table, Ant, that's going to say, what are you, crazy? How are you turning down $425 million or whatever? Like that's the thing that I think makes it possible. As far as the trade side of it goes, which would be the first thing in getting him. I think the Mets have a really good mix of players that are affordable and major league ready, some of whom are on the major league roster, pitchers and hitters that would entice Detroit. I do. And look, Brett Beatty's not going to be the linchpin of that package, but if you want Brett Beatty, there is no one that you would take off the table outside of Nolan McLean for Tarek Skubal. You could trade anybody else. Like, I think Jonah Tong is as close to an untouchable because of what his ace potential is on the high side. Yeah. I think it's very hard to trade a 22-year-old with that kind of upside. But in a deal for Tarek Skubal, you'd have to do it. Also, just to be fair, you can't protect everybody, right? You can't say, if you're trying to trade for star players like the Mets are, you can't say, no, you can't have Nolan McLean and you also can't have Jonah Tong, but you got Brendan Sproat. Like, people are going to be like, well, we don't want Brandon Sproat. We think Brandon Sproat's going to be a 3. Jonah Tong might be Tim Lincecum. Jonah Tong might be an ace. So if we're trading you an ace, we want the guy who has the ace upside, even if Brandon Sproat is, can pitch for us in the major leagues right now. We might want both guys.
And I think I'm only giving up both Sproat and Tong in a deal for Skubal. I don't think I do that with any other pitcher, maybe Peralta, if it's just maybe them two or something like that. But
I wouldn't give them both up for Peralta.
Well, they even talking about, I know it's been kind of like debunked that the Twins are going to be trading their pitchers, but the Joe Ryan for Tong, I don't know if I'm trading Tong for Joe Ryan. And I seen a lot of Met fans too, that they're not as interested in that deal as if it was, a Skubal. Like, let's be fair. And you mentioned it earlier. The Mets want an ace, and if you want an ace in free agency, you're paying him a lot of money, and in the trade market, you're giving up prospects no matter what. So you got to get used to that whole situation happening. When it comes to trying to sign Skubal too, I wonder if the fact that, and I think it was Green Machine, there's a couple other comments in here as well that mentioned it. If I find it out, I will. I think it was John Connolly too as well. Once the season is over, there is a huge possibility that this lockout happens. Do these guys want to sign before the lockout and have their contracts done? Because there's talks that this could be a full season lockout. Like, that's how bad, how worse this lockout is from the previous one that we passed through that only lasted a couple of months.
Which, by the way, would be malpractice by MLB, but that's a different story for a different day.
Of course.
I do think, Ant, that factors in to a potential Skubal extension because, look, I don't think we're going to come out of the lockout, whether it lasts a year or a week or a day, whatever. I don't think we're going to come out of that with a salary cap in baseball. I think that's just a bridge too far, but we might come out of it with different structures. We might come out of it with limits on deferrals. We might come out of
penalties,
it with
maybe
more penalties. So I think if you're Boris and you have a chip to play, which is Tarek Skubal being the highest paid pitcher in Major League Baseball history, which is the kind of contract he could get. That's why I say you get him in your building and the next day you're like, hey, how does 10 years, 400 million sound? And then you go from there. And whether you take, like I said, 425 or 450 over that same length of time, whatever, I think there's an incentive to sign that, knowing the uncertainty of it, right? What if you're like, listen, we want to give you a deal that has, some deferred money, and not a ton, but what if there are going to be limits on deferrals, either in individual contracts or how much a team can do overall? We know the Mets don't do a ton of deferrals compared to like what the Dodgers do, but it is a factor. And it's something you have to think about. And I think it's something that the player and the team and the agent all would have to consider, is not just the work stoppage. What does the landscape of Major League Baseball contracts look like on the other side of the work stoppage? And I think you'd want to get that guy paid, and you'd want to set that record with that contract. And I think the Mets would realize the kind of player that they have on their hands, and they know it would take a record-setting deal.
Corey Don Brent saying, I know it's the more boring option, but I think we should keep the kids instead of trading them. Stearns is right that we got to develop our own aces, and I think we're close. You know, that is obviously not the worst idea, right? Like we should be developing our own pitchers, considering how much all these guys are costing.
100%.
That we can get some of these guys, but we're talking about being patient in this New York market and waiting for these guys to develop, which there are Met fans, including Corey, that are willing to be patient, and you can sign a Michael King or an Imai or even Framber Valdez, or wait until Skubal's a free agent next year, and Peralta, and hold on to these guys. But,
And, the thing is, and I know you and I have talked about this like privately too, it's just when you're in the Mets position in New York with Cohen coming off the year that they just had, and you're also in this position where the Mets have failed every other year, not under the Wilpons, since Cohen has taken over.
Big time
love
fails.
Cohen. I think Cohen is the best thing to happen to this franchise in a very long time. I know people are down on him. I really like David Stearns. I think he's the best person running the baseball operation since Frank Cashin. That's 37 years ago or whatever. So I think they're in really good hands. I think that's true. I think Corey makes a great point. The best way to get an ace is to develop them so that you don't have to spend massive prospect capital. Some people are like, I want to have Skubal on the team. Just wait till next year and pay for him. Don't trade for him. Well, okay, you either have to pay a ton of money, or you have to pay a ton of prospects, or you have to do both. Or you could develop them, pay them yourself because Cohen has the money to do that along the way, and then just keep them. That is the possibility. But that is the long-term goal. That is the plan. That's why you make Nolan McLean untouchable, obviously, because you know what his potential is. And that's why I said you would make Jonah Tong untouchable pretty much for anybody not named Skubal or Skeens, right? Skeens isn't getting traded, but you see my point.
Yeah, of course.
It's the same way I operate with Carson Benj on the position player side, right? Like, to me, the Mets have a couple of untouchables in their entire organization, right? Some are established stars, right? Like, obviously you're not trading Soto, you're not trading Lindor, you're not trading any of the people you just signed. You're not trading Devin Williams. That's a different animal. You put that off to the side. To me, the only players you can't trade, the completely untouchables, are McLean and Francisco Alvarez. Reason being their age, their positional value, and their star potential at those positions. You have a potential ace starter. You have a potential 30 home run bat catcher who's 23 years old. You can't trade those pieces. The next two guys that are basically untouchable because of the same reasons are Carson Benj and Jonah Tong. But there are some situations, again, because you have to give to get, that I would trade those guys, but they are very limited. I'm trading Tong for Tarek Skubal. Nobody else. I'm trading Carson Benj. If you told me right now, Ant, that I could get Fernando Tatis Jr., I'll put Carson Benj in the deal.
There you go. Carlos,
but I'm
reading your mind.
But I'm not trading him for nearly anybody else. I'm not trading him for Byron Buxton. I'm not even trading him for a guy who I think would take a package and would be really good on the Mets, which is Duran from the Red Sox. Like, I'm not putting Carson Benj in that deal. You can have some other players. We can make it up. We can figure out how to give you the combination of, Ryan Clifford and Jet Williams and Jack Wenninger or whoever. Like, we can make that deal work. I mean, you're not getting Carson Benj. Fernando Tatis Jr., you can have Carson Benj. You want to talk Tarek Skubal? You can have Jonah Tong. I'm not giving you these guys for anybody else. So there's really two absolute untouchables, and I think there's four total untouchables because, are they going to trade Skubal? They're not going to trade Tatis Jr., at least not now. So, those four guys, Tong, Benj, McLean, and Alvarez, to me, don't go anywhere. And obviously, again, Lindor and Soto, they're not going anywhere. But you have to mention it because everything you say, people try to take it as absolutes. You're like, what about Lindor? Like, obviously, they're not trading Lindor. Those are the stars. Those are the core.
You mentioned Byron Buxton as we wrap up the pitching here. I know that Minnesota's kind of like on the mend here for whether they want to trade or not, or how they're going about their business. But does a Joe Ryan, Byron Buxton, or a Pablo Lopez, Byron Buxton deal intrigue you? Prospects aside, does that deal intrigue on the fact that kills two birds with one stone?
It does. It does intrigue me for sure. The two birds with one stone is nice. Again, take Odd Villain. What up? I shouted out Odd Villain before. Odd Villain is here now. What's up, man? That does intrigue me because, again, you're raising the floor and the ceiling of this team in one fell swoop in two positions of need. I understand Byron Buxton is not a healthy player often, and that is a factor. But again, a lot of these players are going to have warts on them when you're trying to talk about getting trades or working out trades, because there's a reason why these teams want to move off of these players. Byron Buxton, if he was playing every game, every year, the Twins would never trade him. He makes $15 million a year. We just saw what he could do in a mostly healthy season last year. He's still so talented. And I think when you look at the landscape of two-way players in center field, and Byron Buxton would be like the best center fielder in baseball next to Julio Rodriguez. You know what I mean? Like the way that this position is set up right now, there's not a lot of guys who are great at playing defense and giving you tremendous offense. I think if the Mets re-signed Pete, I think then you could start to look at a outfielder who gives you high potential, but has injury history, whether that's Buxton or a guy like Luis Robert. Because if you think about it, Ant, you have Lindor, plays every day. You have Soto, plays every day. You just got Marcus Semien, plays every day. If you bring back Pete Alonso, he plays every day. That's four guys that you can expect to be in there all the time. If you have that, I think you could take a flyer on Luis Roberts' upside. I think you could take a flyer on, can Byron Buxton stay healthy and give us what we need? I think if you don't bring back Pete, that starts to get more complicated, so I think that is the tricky part. Also, if you don't bring back Pete, you're really putting yourself in a spot that now that you've traded Nimmo, which I was for, but now
the
that
two biggest run producers on the team.
Correct. And you need to have protection for Soto. And the problem is the only other person you can slide in there is Kyle Schwarber. But if you sign Kyle Schwarber, now you're incredibly left-handed and he has to DH. Pete, if you bring him back, should DH 50% of the time. Maybe he DHs 25% of the time to start. I don't know, whatever. But the point is, Pete, we talked about it. He offers you something on defense. Schwarber is a better hitter than Pete, but he's an automatic DH. You've now clogged that up. You now can't rotate your DH. You can never take Soto off his feet. You can never take Lindor off his feet. So as good as Schwarber is, I just don't think he's a fit.
Yeah,
and I
Yankees
think
have that problem with Stanton.
Yes.
They can't move away from him.
Exactly. There's nothing you can do. And for all the worry that Pete's going to fall off and be an unhealthy player, well, again, he can still offer you some stuff if he took a hit offensively, if he started to regress. Kyle Schwarber's another big body type player. What if he takes a hit offensively? That's it then. Then you're just stuck with him. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen, but it could. So I don't know why you wouldn't give a 5-year deal to Pete and you'd give a 5-year deal to Schwarber. And Schwarber's a better overall hitter. He is. But to me, it's a crazy trade-off. And once you trade Lindor, you open yourself up where you could sign Schwarber, you could sign Kyle Tucker, you could do anything you kind of want because you've opened up a roster spot and you've cleared that money and that contract. But I don't know that just replacing that with a contract that locks you into a position is the smartest thing. That's why, like, Kyle Schwarber's a better player than Cody Bellinger, but you can't argue Cody Bellinger fits the team way better than Kyle Schwarber does, even if they bring back Pete.
Yeah, for as strong as the pitching market is, the offensive market kind of takes a hit really this season. Obviously you have Schwarber and Alonso and Bellinger, but you really have to land one of those. And the Mets are in that opposition now that they've gotten rid of Brandon Nimmo, who was their most clutch player, right? This team struggled with runners in scoring position, and he batted over 300. And that's a big hit to take. You're hoping that the rest of this offense and lineup, stays strong, and Beatty has another big second half like he did, but this time for the whole season. And Francisco Alvarez is healthy, and Marcus Semien somewhat comes back to offensive form. It's a lot of ifs to ask for. So I think that, Pete Alonso needs to be a part of this. I know you got to get going because you got
I give you another. I can do another 5 minutes.
Another 5 minutes. All right, man. So you know what? Since we're talking about Schwarber here real quick, because he was a part of they're talking about like this kind of bidding war between the Mets and Phillies if Pete Alonso is not coming back, or you know what? I don't even know if they could go for both. I think they'll both be too expensive to try to get both of these. But the Mets do need two offensive pieces on this team. Like
they do.
They really do. Schwarber hit 56 homers at 132 RBIs, 928 OPS. He's got a wins above replacement at 4.7. He's obviously the best possible option if Alonso falls through and probably should be the priority, you would think, right? Or I can't think like Cody Bellinger obviously can play outfield and first base, but I don't know if he provides that pop that Schwarber does, and he did not play too well outside of Yankee Stadium, which is a big concern as well.
Yeah, it's some of the things I said before with Schwarber. He obviously fits. He's very good. So any team would want the numbers, the production that he gives you, but I don't know, man. Like, he's left-handed. He's a DH only. If you don't bring back Pete, if Pete signs somewhere else first, I think then you can turn your attention to Schwarber. I don't think it's realistic to bring in both guys because then you're doing exactly what you said you didn't want to do. And if you if you sign Pete and Schwarber, your offense is great, but then Pete has to play first base every day because where's Schwarber going to play? He has to DH. So again, then Soto's never off his feet. Lindor's never off his feet. Pete is your first baseman, come what may. To me, that's the antithesis of what David Stearns was talking about in terms of run prevention, more athletic. That's less athletic. You've signed two of the least athletic players you could possibly sign when Cody Bellinger and Kyle Tucker are out there. And it's a very short-sighted move. And look, if you win a World Series, who cares? Obviously. And maybe you could win a World Series with that lineup. But you better slug then. You better beat you better beat teams down because that's the only way. So I think the Mets, and we had, Abby and I had Abby Mastracco on, who covers the Mets for the New York Daily News this week on Wednesday. And I said to her, I think the Mets needed two bats before they traded Brandon Nimmo. They definitely need two bats now. And that's why it's hard to see the Mets trading Nimmo and the bad years of his contract to then turn around and give a potentially worse contract to Cody Bellinger. It's strange to see that. But again, Ant, he fits this team so well. The versatility that he provides you is unlike any other player that is available right now, full stop. And let's just paint this scenario. You sign Pete and you sign Bellinger. Okay, well now Pete can DH or play first. He could do a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Bellinger can play first base. He can also go play left field. He can also play center field if you need him to. So now, what if you get to spring training and you really want to give the job to Carson Bench, but he's not ready? Okay, well, I think if Carson Bench isn't ready to start the season, if you have a bat like Cody Bellinger and an outfielder like Cody Bellinger, I think you could probably start the season with Tyrone Taylor in center, Cody Bellinger in one corner, Juan Soto in the other corner. I think you'll be all right for a few weeks to get Bench up to speed. If Bench is ready, well, then Bench plays whatever position he's better at, center field, and Bellinger plays left, or Bellinger plays right and Soto plays left. He moves to left field. But then you can also get guys off their feet. You could DH Bellinger. here and there. You can DH Soto here and there. You can DH Pete. When Pete DHs, Bellinger plays first. So I know why people are scared of Bellinger, and you should be. This is a guy who was an MVP and then got DFA'd. It's scary. You're right. He hit better at Yankee Stadium than he did away. It's scary, but he fits what the Mets are trying to do in terms of athleticism and versatility like nobody else on the market. And that's the thing that I keep going back to. I know Ibby jokes around on the show. He's got the belly bell he rings every time I bring up Cody Bellinger's name. But it's not that I'm ignoring the bad stuff or just saying sign him at all costs. But I know they need 2 bats. And to me, especially if you're trying to trade for a pitcher, just sign both bats. Sign Pete, sign Bellinger. Do I think the Mets are better with Jarren Duran instead of Cody Bellinger? Probably. But can the Mets trade for Freddie Peralta and Duran? No, I don't think so.
They're just not in the position. They're in a position where they need so much bullpen help, starting pitching help. They need 2 bats. It's too much to, you're really going to clear out the farm system if you're making multiple trades here. So they got to figure out some creative ways to do it. And obviously Cohen has the money to do it. I assume that he's willing to take on the tax of that if it happens. So I see, possibility where the Mets can do damage there if they do sign a Bellinger and do sign an Alonso here. So, and there you go. He's got the bell for you right there. Boom. With the Alonso and Diaz contract demands here, they're seking 7-year deal for Pete Alonso, right?
Not happening.
No
one's giving him a 7-year deal.
No one's going to give him that. Joel Sherman spoke to some agents saying that wasn't even going to be close. I think he quoted saying no one is giving him 5 years. He would be lucky to get 4. And that will luckily come with a lower AAV and a lot of deferred dollars. Josh Naylor got 5 years. I think Pete Alonso is better than Josh Naylor.
Josh Naylor is younger, though, and he's a true first baseman.
So I think a 4 to 5 year deal is fair enough for Pete. When you look at Edwin Diaz, obviously there's some gaps in the talk with, Will Salmon of The Athletic said Diaz wants 5, Mets want 3. Can they meet somewhere in the middle? Who is the priority for you? I thought in the beginning of this offseason that Edwin Diaz was the priority, considering the way that this bullpen was shaped. But now that they have Devin Williams, now I know we know what happened in New York last year, but they've kind of given themselves a little bit of leeway here with signing Devin Williams, that maybe they don't have to focus right away on Edwin Diaz, and they can try to go after getting Pete sold here, signed.
Yeah, I think to me, Diaz was the priority when the offseason started, slightly over Pete, 1A, 1B kind of thing. Because Diaz is the best closer. Good teams need closers. Where else are you going to go kind of thing? And when the offseason started, even now, still, I think you can draw a bit of a roadmap where the Mets can put together a really good offense with some of the players that are available without Pete Alonso if they wanted to go in that direction. So I think Edwin is still up there. But you're right. The Mets did protect themselves very, 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 very well by going out and getting Devin Williams. Now, I think the Devin Williams signing by itself in a vacuum is great. I think it is
good term.
I think it's next level if they sign Diaz. I think if you're poo-pooing the Devin Williams signing and dismissing it out of hand, I think you're kind of missing the forest for the trees a little bit. I know this guy did not have a good year in the Bronx overall, but if you look under the hood at what Devin Williams did, his baseball savant page is exactly where it's always been for his career. The airbender, still a unhittable pitch.
Yeah.
He had a career ERA that was like 1.86. Career ERA, 1.86 prior to joining the Yankees. That's his whole time in Milwaukee. Then you look at the fact that a lot of the under the hood numbers as well, and his fielding independent pitching was I don't have the numbers in front of me. I pulled them up on our show, but you're talking 206 fielding independent pitching. I think his expected batting average against was 190 something. It's just all of the numbers were there. He just got snake bit a bit. And I think that also you have to remember Edwin Diaz's first year with the Mets was horrendous. Actually worse than Devin Williams' first year with the Yankees.
Yeah, he single-handedly cost us going to postseason.
Yeah, and I think you should. Edwin Diaz, we all gave him so much credit when he finally had that massive year and he re-signed with the Mets before free agency even started. He could have walked. A lot of Mets fans treated Edwin Diaz like garbage, and then he had that career year, that incredible season, and he was like, no, I like it here. I want to stay.
Yeah.
And Devin Williams got treated like garbage. And in some cases, rightfully so. He started off very poorly in the middle of the season. He was bad, whatever. But he then said, I like New York and I want to stay in New York. And hey, there's David Stearns, a guy I know. He runs a team in New York. I want to stay here. Devin Williams could have went and got money somewhere else. There's reports from very reliable sources that he had 4 or 5 deals on the table, some of which were to definitely close. He took money to come to the Mets to maybe set up for Edwin Diaz. I don't think you should just brush that stuff aside. So I think Devin Williams is primed for a massive year, whether he's the closer or the setup man. I think he will be the setup man. I think the Mets will figure it out with Edwin Diaz. I do. I think that market is going to move faster. So a long-winded answer to say the Mets have covered themselves well with Diaz to the point where I think you're right. Alonso maybe becomes a bit more of the priority now. They've kind of shifted roles, but I just think Alonso's saga is going to play out much longer. I could see a situation where we know who Diaz is playing for by the end of the winter meetings.
That was going to be one of my next questions for you was your winter meetings predictions. Before I get that, Devin Williams, I think he knows his role too. I mean, he did it mentioned in the presser. He'll close if they sign Diaz. He's okay with being the setup man. He's done both, even in Milwaukee. So I think this could possibly be a win-win situation for Stearns, even if Diaz doesn't return. I know Diaz is the better closer, but you always have to have a fallback option, and you could do a lot worse than having Devin Williams be your closer. So we'll see if he can turn that whole situation around. But your winter meetings prediction, what do you think is going to happen here as we wrap up?
I said on the new show that we're doing on Till Mets Do Us Part, shameless plug for Walkoff whiskey, but I said that I think the Mets will make 2 moves during the winter meetings. I think, I don't know. None of us really know. 2 trades, no idea. 2 signings, no idea. Whatever. I don't know if there'll be 2 massive moves. I think there'll be like a pretty big move of significance. So like, let's say, re-signing Edwin Diaz or signing Framber Valdez, like something like that would be like a significant move. And then probably a smaller one. Maybe trading Jeff McNeil for somebody. Maybe trading Kodai Senga for somebody, which wouldn't be small to us Mets fans because it would change the fabric of the team yet again in a lesser way than Brandon Nimmo, but it would change. So I think it would be big to us Mets fans, but smaller league-wide, right? So let's say I think there's 2 moves the size of signing Framber Valdez and then trading Jeff McNeil for like Mitch Keller or something, where you're like, okay, I see the plan here. I see what this is. So I think there are 2 moves that happen for the Mets. I don't know what they are. Those are just examples. So I will say that. The other part of it is I think Edwin Diaz will sign somewhere this week. I know I just said that, but I do. I think whether it's with the Mets or somewhere else, I think Edwin Diaz is going to get a deal done. The reliever market's moving.
Yeah,
There's
real quick.
Not a ton left.
No.
So, and that's
like Robert Suarez is like from San Diego. He's probably left.
Robert Suarez, Peter Fairbanks.
Yeah, Kyle Finnegan. If you like Kyle Finnegan.
All good pitchers, by the way.
Yeah.
All pitchers I would take on the Mets, but not to replace Diaz. And that's why I said this on our show. That's why the Mets were so smart to go get Devin Williams. Look, they were never going to reunite with Ryan Helsley, and I understand why. But Ryan Helsley signed. What happens if the day Devin Williams signed with the Mets, he signed somewhere else instead? Now you better go sign Edwin Diaz, because Devin Williams was one of the best closers in baseball with Josh Hader and Edwin Diaz for the entire time he was in Milwaukee. So again, I know people are a little down on him, and he's not Diaz, to be fair. Diaz is better than him. So the Mets should go get both players. But I think that they've covered themselves well, because if they didn't sign Devin Williams and then Diaz gets a 5-year offer from Toronto, he's going to go to Toronto. Then who's your closer? Peter Fairbanks? I mean, Peter Fairbanks is good. The drop off of going from Edwin Diaz to Peter Fairbanks is enormous. The drop off of going from Edwin Diaz to Devin Williams is less. So it becomes something that you can stomach. I think there's going to be some big moves here. I think the way the offseason has started, not just for the Mets, but just for everybody. I think that sometimes the winter meetings can be a little sleepy. I don't think this is going to be one of those times. I think teams are really engaged in trade conversations, and I think you're going to see a flurry of activity. I'm super excited for it. I think that's what we're going to see.
Yeah, I think one of two things is going to happen. Like you mentioned, we're going to get some finality on this Edwin Diaz situation where he signs or goes in another direction. And I think the Mets do sign someone really quick too, right afterwards, to see if they can get, like, if it's a Suarez or, like you mentioned, a Pete Fairbanks. And then I do think that they acquire a starter here, whether it is a free agent or a trade. Them being, close or whatever it is to a Framber Valdez and all this interest in Imai. And I think that they land a starter, whether it's an ace or not, I don't know. But I do think that they come away these winter meetings with a starter. I think that the hitting market is going to take a little bit longer with Pete. We saw it took all the way to February with Pete, Bellinger, those guys, Schwarber. They want a lot of money. That's going to take a while to put together. But I do think the reliever and the pitcher gets dealt with.
I tend to agree. I also think look, anything can happen, but we've talked a lot about the potential trades with Peralta or Skubal. I think when you have all the GMs in one place, I think we're going to find out, I'm not saying a deal for one of those players will happen, not just to the Mets, but somewhere during this week. But I think this is the kind of place where if you're the Tigers or the Brewers and you're unsure, you really can learn a lot about what you can get if you trade those players. And I think we're going to see the groundwork be set. Like, we might come out of the winter meetings and then you finally get the thing where the Tigers are like, we're not trading Skubal because they're not getting anything that even approaches, a package that they would do. So I think there'll be some finality there. Also, I do think it would be telling if the Mets come out of the winter meetings without a starting pitcher and you never get a definitive answer from the Brewers or the Tigers about we're not trading these players. I think that means the Mets feel like they're confident they can get one of them. Absolutely. And that's why they're not overextending themselves to sign one now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be, like you said, it's going to be fun week ahead of us. I'm pretty sure you got it covered down until Mets do his part. We'll be covering breaking news here on Subway to Shea. Before I let you go real quick, we didn't even talk about the QBC, man. We did all this. Don't talk about QBC. Give us a quick, preview about it. It's going to be Saturday, December 13th, next Saturday, 4 points by Sheraton in Flushing, Queens from 10 to 6. Give us a little preview on it.
The QBC is great. There are still some tickets available. Somebody DM'd me yesterday saying that they just got their tickets. So there are some tickets available. I know they do tiered ticketing in terms of what you can get for the price of admission and stuff like that. And certain things do go away quicker, like certain VIP packages, things like that. But there are still tickets to get into the event for sure. So check it out at queensbaseballconvention.com. I have been the host for the last 4 years. This will be year number 5. You can see one of the QBC posters behind me. There's other ones above it. But yeah, it's a great event. I know the Mets did their own fan fest last year, but forever, and I don't even know if the Mets are doing one again this year, the QBC has become the de facto fan fest for Mets fans. It's a great way to connect Mets fans all together. I've met people who listen to Till Mets Do His Part, watch Till Mets Do His Part. It's been awesome to connect to the community that way. And just for Mets fans, it's great to have the opportunity to meet these players, obviously to meet and mingle, but, to meet these players and spend a day in cold December that, where you can kind of think about baseball. And listen, since Cohen's taken over the team, especially, there's been a flurry of activity every year, either right before, right after, during the Queens Baseball Convention. I think one year it was like the Mets signed Verlander, I think, during the convention or something like that. We found out DeGrom was leaving right before that, and like all this stuff. So it's been wild. And I think last year Soto signed beginning of December, if I remember correctly.
He signed the day after.
The day after. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we just missed the boat there, but, you get a lot of speculation and, what's going to happen? And, is Soto there? And, is it going to happen? Is it finally going to come through? So, shout out to Green Machine saying the Queens Baseball Convention gets better every year. I think it does. Keith and Dan and all the people over there do a tremendous job. I'm thrilled to be a part of it. And look, the proof is in the pudding, right? Like yes, they fly me out and stuff to do it, but I am flying there. Like I don't live in New York anymore, and I'm flying across the country to be a part of this event, to host the event. Ibby and I are doing a special edition of Till Mets Do Us Part. We're going to have some amazing guests kind of jump in, plus live questions like we did last year, because like your show, live comments are such a part of our show. So we'll do, take questions from the audience. But yeah, and apart from that, Jesse Orozco is going to be there doing a panel. Brett Beatty is going to be there doing a panel, and Terry Collins will be back. He did a panel, I think 2 years ago, but now he'll be doing a panel with Tom Hallion, who's the ass in the jackpot umpire. So they'll be doing a little bit of a reunion there. So it's great, man. It's a great event every year. I look forward to it. I'm happy to be a part of it for now 5 years in a row. And I hope I can do it for as long as they'll let me.
Yeah, and I think the best thing about that too, that separates from, the Mets Fan Fest Day, is that they really make you feel like family when you come to this event. This is now going to be my third straight year doing this. And, Keith Blacknick, the media goon, has been always so kind to me and having me be a part of it. And, being a part of the State of the Mets panel with Mark Healy. I even got to do the one-off with interviewing Doc Gooden, which was a lot of fun. So it's a really fun atmosphere. Check it out. A lot of memorabilia to buy and stuff like that, autographs to get. I mean, you'll find everything you want there at the QBC. So make sure you check it out from 10 to 6.
Well, it's real quick. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I know he's become, famous for JMac Customs for all the OMG stuff that he did 2 years ago. But prior to that season, I don't know if he's going to be there this year, but JMac Customs has been at the QBC for like the last 3 years in a row. That's where I met him before he made a sign for Jose Iglesias, before any of that happened. So you never know who you're going to meet and interact with. He's a guy who's always done tremendous work. His signage is fantastic. And he was there as a vendor selling custom made Mets stuff. And it's just like, those are the kinds of people that you meet. And he's a great dude. He's an awesome guy. But it's also just like, that's where you run into people. So Odd Villain, this will be my first QBC. Man, it's you should be hype. It's going to be fun. It's always fun. 10 to 6, like you said.
10 to 6 at the 4 Points Sheraton, 3668 Farrington Street, Flushing, Queens, New York. John, has been a lot of fun. We had close to almost 400 people in the room with us today. And shout out to Michael King. Is that on all Mets platforms, you guys have been insight into the Mets team, best insight and team needs, great content. Really appreciate that. If you're not doing so already, make sure you're following John and Till Mets Do Us Park. Subscribe to their YouTube page, Twitter, all of that stuff. Anything else you want to promote, John? Promote the Whiskey Show.
Yeah, so the Whiskey Show is a new thing I'm doing. The first episode was Friday. It'll be every Friday, 7 p.m. Eastern time. And the thought process is, I like whiskey, but no, the thought process is the live comments are a big part of our show, but we can't always get to everyone. We try, super chats are great because it helps, make sure that your question gets answered and stuff like that. But we try to get to as many things as we can. We can't always get to everybody. And when we have guests on, like we do in the off season, often it's even harder to get to the live comments. We don't want to ignore anybody. We don't want people to feel like they're being left out. So Walkoff whiskey is a simple concept. I pour a single glass of whiskey and get into the show with no agenda. And as long as it takes me to finish the glass of whiskey, I will just answer your questions, react to your comments, anything that you want to talk about, you, the viewer, as far as the Mets are concerned, their plans, whatever, we can get into it. So it's the goal is to have it be purely driven by the commenters and the live viewers. So, it's something that it's available on all the Till Mets Do Us Part places. So if you subscribe to Till Mets Do Us Part, you'll already be able to watch us there. So it's just a little bit more content during the week. Till Mets Do Us Part is every Wednesday. It's me and Ibby, 5:30 p.m. Eastern for about 2 hours. And then Walkoff Whiskey every Friday, 7 p.m. Eastern. Just me, you, and a glass of whiskey. It's a lot of fun.
I'm not a whiskey guy, but like I said to you in on X, I'm gonna have to bring some tequila to that fun show on Friday night.
Go for it. Let's do it.
John, appreciate you so much. Thanks so much for being a part of the show. You can follow me on X, Instagram, and TikTok at Subway to Shea. You can follow me personally at Rivera86. Subscribe to the Subway to Shea podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you prefer to listen. But if you want to be a part of the chat and conversation like you were today, you're doing that here on YouTube. Also, super chat, super stickers, super thanks, the whole 9 yards, all a part of it. Appreciate everyone for tuning in. Enjoy the winter meetings. We'll be back if anything breaks. If not, next Sunday, 10 a.m. We'll see you there. Thanks so much, everyone. Take care, and let's go Mets.